What's up, you guys? Void here, coming back at you with another video. This time we're going to be looking at the top 5 Temur colored cards in the Commander format. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the thumbs up. Definitely appreciate all the support from my channel. Before I get into the top 5, I want to go over some honorable mentions here, just some cards that I felt were worth mentioning. Guided Passage. Your opponent gets to choose a creature card, a land card, a non-creature card, a non-land card, and they get to look at your library and do this. So yes, they get all the choices, and that's the main reason why it's not on the list, because you really have to structure your deck in a way to where you're putting the best possible options in there, which is kind of expensive. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong. This is Commander, and there are a ton of weak cards that are pretty much just staples in the format. Late game, getting something like a Soul Ring is not that big of a deal, so it's easy for your opponents to kind of fix us into a way where it really doesn't matter. It is kind of funny just to give your opponents these options just to look through your deck, and being able to look through your opponent's deck, similar things are quite fun and entertaining. Temur Ascendancy is pretty good. It's like a Convergent Crossroads, but just for you and your creatures. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield with power 4 or greater, you get to draw a card. So it's good card draw, and it gives your creatures haste. It is a little bit too specific, though, in Temur colors. This is something you would rather want in just green in general rather than in Temur. So it's good enough for some Temur decks, but I feel like there's still many decks in these colors that don't want to play this card. Then we have a commander option here in Yasova Dragonclaw. If you're able to get her power up high enough, her triggered ability is essentially an act of treason during combat, which is kind of interesting. And there are certain ways that you can manipulate this and use sack outlets or Deadeye Navigator to make sure that creature remains under your control or doesn't return back to your opponent's control if at all possible. So she's an interesting commander option, not my preferred option though in Temur. And then we have Shaman of the Great Hunt, which is pretty good for combat. It gives creatures you control that deal combat damage plus some +1 counters. So I'd much rather like him in limited. I think he's better if you want to play something like Cube. I feel like he's much more interesting in that type of setting. Whereas in Commander, there's certain decks where you would want him in, but he's very limited by his Temur colors for Commander. He can't fit into a deck like, say, Marchesa the Black Rose, because he also has green on the card. So can't really fit into those decks. That's the immediate problem here. So he's really just meant for Temur decks. So, but just good all around, and he gives card draw too for creature-based decks, which is awesome. Then we have Intet the Dreamer, which, you know my opinion about these dragons. They're only useful once you connect. I don't like cards that are only useful once they deal combat damage. I like cards that kind of do things beforehand, and if they happen to get better once they hit, then that's wonderful, but they really need to have some sort of versatility, and to me, Intet's just too linear of a commander option, and probably better as one of the 99 in a dragon deck, but even then, there are still so many better dragons to choose from. So, onto the actual list. Number 5, I have Sarkhan Unbroken, the only Temur colored planeswalker, and he is very specific towards dragons, yes, but that is just his alt. There are some situations where you don't necessarily need to ult him and he's still pretty good. His plus is pure value. You get to draw a card and you get to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Super useful in any aggressive dragon-based deck or just creature-based deck in general. And his minus gets you a 4/4 flying dragon token. That's pretty good. There's a lot of minuses and a lot of abilities on planeswalkers in general that get you tokens to help protect that planeswalker's loyalty. The fact that this is a 4/4 flying body that it gets you is pretty good. The ult obviously is meant for dragons, and it's essentially a win con for those decks. He's only number 5 because he's so specific to dragon decks. He doesn't really synergize well with other creature-based decks once you get to his ult. It's just for the 5-color dragon decks. You could go Temur dragons, but that's too narrow. You would want to open them up to as many different possibilities, and you have some dragons in white, and you have some dragons in black, and playing the 5-color Ur-Dragon deck or similar decks give you that potential. So he's definitely going to win you the game if you get to his ult. Number 4 is Sirach Dragonclaw. Now his benefit here is the fact that he has flash and he cannot be countered. He also makes all of your creature spells uncounterable. But here's the thing, it doesn't just end there. He gives all other creatures you control trample, which is super useful in just creature-based decks, any deck where you have a ton of creatures out there. This helps give those decks an advantage when it comes to control decks, being able to counter your creatures. This is one big weakness when it comes to competitive multiplayer commander. You have some decks that are just meant to win by combo. You have some decks that protect their combos, and you have some decks that kind of go after you, and they'll counter all your creatures, or they're going to counter your Craterhoof Behemoth or your Deadeye Navigator, whatever creature you have that's going to help you win the game. Making those kinds of plays just uncounterable, it's really going to help you win games. The fact that he gives the static ability of Trample, that's just insane. Number 3 is Riku of 2 Reflections. Now, it's probably my favorite Temur commander option, mainly because he's not as easy to play as some other ones on this list, and 2 of them are upcoming, but he's just so much fun to play with when you kind of situate your deck to where you have some control-based spells, you have some creature spells. Temur colors are primarily known as being creature-based colors, so you're going to have some big creatures, you're going to have creature-based decks primarily. It kind of gets lost when you focus on just control in general, and not a lot of people focus on control with these colors. Riku is definitely, I wouldn't say he's pure control, because you can obviously play a creature-based build and get creature tokens and utilize things like ETBs off of things like Mull Drifters, Eternal Witness, get multiple copies of these types of creatures and just get a ton of value off of them. Or you could play the control game and copy your counter spells. That way you have the ability to counter something straight up, and your opponents really have to waste a ton of counter spells, their own answers, just to keep up with you. So you can play your win cons, copy them, and your opponents have to counter it twice, or they have to double up on their removal just to deal with your problems. He's such a problematic commander for your opponents, and he's quite underrated in that regard. I don't think people really view him as being that problematic, but he's definitely interesting. Probably the most interesting commander option for me, at least. Just because there's really no right or wrong way to play him. You can go all out on creatures, or you can go all out on control, and he's pretty fun either way. Number 2 is Animar, Soul of Elements. You knew he was coming. Number 2 might be a surprise to some of you. Well, there is a number 1. I'll get to it in a second, but Animar is just the epitome of creature-based decks. You want to get big creatures out. You want to cast your creatures easier, and he does that by giving himself +1/+1 counters for each creature spell you've cast. So your creature spells overall get cheaper by 1 generic mana for each +1/+1 counter on Animar. Not just this, but the fact that he's also pro white and black means that he gets around the majority of the removal. All of the best targeted removal in this format is usually by white, and a lot of it's also by black too, but the fact that he's pro white is just incredible. Of course, he doesn't get around board wipes, he doesn't get around sacrifice removal, things like that, but the fact that he's going to get around the typical Swords to Plowshares, the Path to Exiles, he's going to get around Hero's Downfall, things like that. So when you can deal with 2 out of 5 colors of Magic, it makes it super easy to sort of swing in uncontested with Animar, because a lot of creatures in this format are white and black, so you're dealing with 2/5 of the colors right there in Magic. Why not? Ton of combos. There's combos associated with Cloudstone Curio, the Eldrazi Titans. You can pretty much cast this for free at a point in the game, where you just have a ton of +1/+1 counters on Animar. And there's just a ton of ways to just abuse the living crap out of this guy. And he's one of the iconic selections for Commander. He's from that original Commander set in 2011. It was just so popular. People are just going to keep playing this guy. They love creature-based decks, and he's definitely the creature-based deck that most people lean towards when they're thinking about building their first Commander decks. He's so powerful. Number 1, to me at least, is Maelstrom Wanderer. And I know this might seem like a stretch, why is he over Animar? To me, he's just more utility. He fits into just about every single deck I've just mentioned, every single Commander option I've just mentioned. You could play Maelstrom Wanderer as one of the 99, and he fits in perfectly. He gives all your creatures haste, which is pretty good. That's what you want in creature-based decks anyway. He is 8 mana, so it is a little bit pricey, but what he does is he essentially gets you 2 more cards from your deck. He gets the double cascade triggers, which is super funny because you could obviously throw this into something like Yidris and get even more cascade triggers when you cast him. The only downside of this is that it gets any non-land card CMC 8 or less from the top of your deck once you hit it. So that is the only downside, but it does get you 2 cards. So if you are playing a deck with a bunch of decent-sized creatures, you're going to get something good off of it. Or if you're playing a control deck or you're playing Storm, This is definitely something that you want for that type of deck. It helps give you more cascade triggers, more cast triggers in general, and you get your storm count build up. It's just good utility. I mean, it's a 7/5. All of your creatures have haste. He makes a good commander option too, and I don't think enough people really consider him as a commander option. But the fact that once you play him, you're suddenly ahead in the game. The sooner you get to play him, the better, of course, but you get 2 more cards from your deck, and you get to cast them. I mean, it's not like you have to pay more mana into it. You get that cast trigger out there. So the more times you get to cast him, the better. You get more things. Obviously, things that help bounce them back to your hand so you get to recast them are useful in those type of decks. But this is just what you want in creature-based decks in general. You want speed, you want aggressiveness, and for 8 mana, you get a 7/5 creature with haste that gives your other creatures haste, but you also get 2 more things. Hopefully there are other big creatures from your deck. That's the best case scenario. Or you hit a win con or something that's CMC under 8. It's pretty awesome. He's definitely my favorite Temur colored card in Commander in general. As a Commander, I do love Riku, but I just love Maelstrom Wanderer as a good Temur colored card. He's definitely the best one in my opinion. So anyway guys, that was my top 5 list for Temur colored cards in the Commander format. Let me know what you think about this list. Let me know which your favorite Temur colored cards are. Remember, if you like the channel, if you like my other videos, hit the subscribe button, like this video, show your support for the channel. Definitely appreciate it. Anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off.